welcome to the Independent Ink with Mr. Fish. I'm Mr. Fish. What follows is a free-form conversation I just had with Roger Waters, where we talk about the importance of speaking truth to power. Actually, probably more precise to say speaking truth to the powerless. Fuck the powerful. So it's a conversation actually speaking truth with the powerless. How is that for a sign of solidarity and go-get-ism? So here's my conversation with Roger Waters. Hope you dig it. I'm not going to do the preamble now. I'm going to do it a little
Oh,
bit.
okay, fine.
Yeah.
Well,
Yes.
your preamble presumably will have to include the fact that I just sent you a work in progress of my new song.
That's what I was wondering what that track was. It thrilled me no end. Like I said, I was convinced I had absolutely everything you've ever done into a microphone, and then you send me that just minutes before we get on.
Yeah, well, I sent you that, and then you said, "What?" I thought I had everything, and I said, "It's a work in progress."
Damn.
It's literally, it's not quite a demo because Gus and I have been working on the track as well,
Yeah.
but it's very much a work in progress.
Oh, it's
Are
lovely.
you recording?
I am,
Good man.
as per your instructions.
Because it's called sumud, which, as I explain at the beginning of the work in progress, and you can, I mean, however you edit this, good luck. But sumud is an Arabic word that means steadfast perseverance, and it's used often by people who speak Arabic, I'm told. And it relates very specifically these days to the steadfast perseverance of the Palestinian people in resistance to the occupation of their land. So it's and I only got that word. This is important because I sent the work in progress to Brian Eno a few weeks ago. And he wrote back to me and he said, "I love it. Sumud." And I went, "What the fuck's he talking about?" Like you do. You know how erudite and educated Brian Eno is. He's
Right.
very erudite, very educated, apart from being a great and lovely man. Notwithstanding the fact that he makes background music for hotel rooms.
Right.
I'm proud and pleased that he does, because I've been in those hotel rooms, and they proudly announce that the stuff you're hearing in the background is the work of Brian Eno. And I think, wow, how cool
Yeah.
is that? My
They
mate
charge you
Brian.
extra for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a
I
good
remember when he had long hair and he was working with Roxy fucking Music and all of that. Because we go back a fair way.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Well, you go back a fair way with a lot of people that
yeah, I do. I do.
So
So,
one thing too is, have you and I sort of have gotten in touch with each other's passions, I guess you can say, through our mutual chum, Chris Hedges.
yeah.
And have you actually spent time with Chris in person? Have you guys
No,
had
the
lunch?
longest I've ever spent with him was making that interview that I did with him last week,
Wow.
which I much enjoyed.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, in that video, which your viewers can check out later on if they want to, but the little bit in it here where we talk about our fathers is deeply moving, or it was to me anyway,
Oh, no,
and I'm sure to
100%.
Chris as well.
Always.
Our paths cross quite often, but it's very difficult to find a parking space and to be able to go off. To find a bar somewhere near the People's Forum where you can have a drink and go, "How are you, mate? How's life treating you?" Because we all know how life is treating us.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
and it's treating us sort of like heroes. And it's not treating us like villains. It's treating us like heroes with broken hearts. I mean, I know you're the same, mate.
Yeah. I
Do I
mean,
call you Dwayne or Mr. Fish or Dwayne?
listen, you can just Since we've become fast friends, you just call me Fish is fine.
Fish, I love that. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that's probably one of the things is probably one of the largest frustrations that I have, and I know that you probably have, is being called controversial for stating the most elemental concerns for humanity. I mean, what you're doing, how we speak and how we communicate our concerns, to me, it's just so elemental. There's not even really a great deal of intellectualism to it. There's not a great deal of even artistic integrity in the sense that it's something that people resonate with because it's just an elemental truth.
That's so right. But you sent me a little thing half an hour ago, which I read, and I loved the article. That's why I wrote back and said I had no idea you could write. You know, because it's very eloquent, I have to say. But also, it struck me in a way that it might not strike other people, because it talks about on the beach and Neville Shute and that 1957 novel, which I read in 1957 or whenever it was, when I was 17 or 16 or whatever I was. No, 59 I was 16, 57 I must have been I was 14 when that novel came out. So maybe I didn't read it for a couple of years after it was published. But it had such a profound effect on me that many years later, when when I was writing, I think, Amused to Death, when I wrote the first draft of the song Amused to Death, it was this, and this is from memory, and that was in 1990. So it's oh no, go at 90, 2000, 2010, 2000, 35 years ago. The Coke bottle on the window blind taps out its meaningless message, its promise of life. The submarine captain on an ebbing tide, thinking it worth a try, puts a party ashore. The Jolly Jack tars pour into the nearest bar. And I've forgotten the rest of the lyrics, but I was telling the story of Neville Shute's On the Beach. And again, to discover eventually a Coca-Cola bottle on the bit of string hanging off the bottom of a blind, blowing in the wind, that is somehow sending out what they thought was a message telling them that people were still alive in Melbourne, Australia. So isn't that weird that you sent me that text this morning?
Yeah, we are somehow
And
connected.
also it's about Pilger, isn't it? Or
Right.
or was that? Did you mention Randy Credico? Because he sent me this morning an interview with John Pilger.
Man, how long have you been awake?
I've been
Because this
awake.
happened this morning for you.
Yeah, but I've been awake quite a few hours. My missus got on a very early flight, so she was up at 6 o'clock to go to JFK because she was flying off abroad
Mm.
for to take care of other business. So yeah, I've been awake for a minute.
All
But
right. Well,
and so we live. What do we do when we're awake? As soon as we wake up, Fish, if I may call you Fish, you know, we go, what have I got to do today? And what I do is if I normally there's tons of shit to do, but I always think, never mind all that. What can you do today for Gaza or for your brothers and sisters all over the world or whatever? It doesn't matter so long as you do something. That's my only thing is I have to do one thing. This is it. I'm doing it. I'm talking to you.
yeah.
This could count. If I don't do anything else today, this will count as my thing.
Well, let's make it the worthwhile contribution that you're going to make today.
Yeah.
So, just going back to your early beginnings, let's start there because I know we're going to end up talking about politics, and I know that we're going to end up talking about recent events and how you're engaging with those things.
Yeah.
First off, let me just also say thank you for your art and activism. I mean, this is what people should be saying first when they meet you, because it's shifted my physiology in a way that I like myself better by virtue of the fact by absorbing your life's work. So I just want to say thank you for that. Um, and now let me move on to some other questions
Yeah.
uh, or just conversation. I don't think you get enough time these days to talk about your beginnings and your even your music so much anymore. You know, it's so much more about your activism. So tell us a little bit about. I know that you studied architecture, and I know that your early influences were probably jazz, blues, that kind of art form, and even the beats, I guess, Ferlinghetti and what those guys were up to.
Well
Um,
spotted.
those are my influences as well. But I'm very curious about how you ended up. Uh, how did music find you?
You know, there's a poem. There's a very early poem, and it's called what the hell was her name? Irish singer. I'm going to have to look it up because it's sort of since you've asked me, I'm going to pull it up now and go. No, I'm because I can see it on this screen over here. Ruby Murray is her name. I remembered it before I saw it. So if I pull that up from poems, there
Mhm.
it is. I can read it to you.
Please.
So here it goes. I'm going to have to read it round this microphone because I put it up on the screen that you're on. Here it goes. I don't need those glasses because it's in huge letters. Ruby Murray. And I must have written this poem 40 years ago, I suppose. She was an Irish singer, by the way, a popular Irish singer back in the 50s and 60s. Was it the husky catch in her voice that moved me, lending her songs as it did that air of melancholy? Hunkered in the warm dust of long summer back against the hot creosote, I paused from sorting through the cigarette cards. Dennis Compton, Tom Graveney, the Bedser twins, Peter May, strange man, and closed my eyes. From some neighbour's prized Ferguson or pie, all glowing valves and simulated walnut, marvellous really what they can do, just like real wood. Across the tops of hollyhocks, intermingling with the news, she sought me out, and in that instant, heart to heart, for the first time I felt the magic touch of music, that shiver down the spine. So there you are, that's it. That's my poem about Ruby Murray touching me when I was maybe 9,
Wow.
hunkered in the dust of hot summer against the hot creosote of the fence in the playground of my Molly Memorial Primary School.
And when did you write that?
I haven't. Well, hang on. Let me have a look. There's probably a date here, but it may not. It may be when I've saved it at some point. So it's unlikely that it's when No, it's nothing to do with when I wrote it. So it's 2019. So that was the last time I moved it from somewhere to
Right.
somewhere else.
Well,
But I have had a folder called poems that I've kept for, I don't know, 40 years or something, that I put things in occasionally. And that would be an early one
yeah.
before I knew I could write, spelt Rite. I always say apologies to Ernie Wise. There's a comedy duo in England called Morecambe and Wise, Eric Morecambe and Ernie Wise. And Ernie Wise, part of his joke, he was the straight man of the duo, but part of his joke was that in his spare time he wrote plays. And so he would say, wonder if I could interest you in this play, what I wrote, Wotirote. And that was the joke. It was good. I liked it.
Yeah. Well, there's poetry and humor. I mean, that's one of the things too that um, just knowing your written work over the years, as far as lyrics go and so forth, you can tell you're a student of poetry. I can tell that you really are moved by it, probably in the same way that you're moved by, Mingus or Coltrane or any of those people, because I guess, was it Donald Hall who said that it's the art of saying the unsayable?
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the things with poetry,
I
and
got a letter from them this morning. Literally, I got an email, and it's called Something's from Eagle Farm, which is where he and Jane Kenyon lived
yeah,
together,
Eagle Pond,
and
yeah,
where my wife and I went after he died.
yeah.
They had a sale there, and actually, I mention it in the Dark Side of the Moon Redux record that I made recently, over over a Great Gig in the Sky, which is Rick's piece of music, as we all know. I put in the part of the story of my friendship with Donald Hall.
We'll talk about that for a second, because he is one of my absolute favorite human beings. I saw him read a great number of times. I'd never got to personally know him or interact with him in any way. What is it about Donald Hall that you really connect with, to the point where, I guess, did you reach out to him?
I'll tell you how it happened. I have a friend who was in the film industry. He's called Bob Shea. He's a producer of films, Nightmare on Elm Street, among many others. New Line Cinema. He and his partner started and ran New Line Cinema, and he lived near me in the Hamptons. And I met him somehow. I can't even remember how I met him. Um, anyway, it turned out that he had been a student of Donald Hall's in university in Michigan. And I'd never heard of Donald Hall. And one day, Bob Shea, uh, he said to me, he said, "I think you might like this book." And he sent me a copy of Essays After 80. So this is quite recent, right?
Yeah.
And I read it, and I wrote him a letter back. I wrote him a letter saying, this book is astonishing. I love this stuff, and blah, 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 blah. And he forwarded it to Donald, his ex-professor. And Donald wrote him back and said, "Who is this guy? This is the best, critique of my work I've ever read." So I must have said something faintly intelligent in my asking about it. And one of the things that connected Donald Hall and me there's a short story in Essays After 80, which is There Is Only One Road. And it's about him and Kirby, his first wife, driving in a Morris Minor to Greece through Yugoslavia in 1951. Well, I went that same road in 1961, exactly 10 years later. And so I wrote to him a little bit about that. And anyway, eventually, so we had some kind of a minor correspondence, and then Bob Shea and I must have been talking. I said, "Can we go and visit? Why don't we go and have lunch with him?" So Shea had a private aeroplane at the time, and we jumped in it and went for lunch. And he was already quite old. He was late 80s, and but we got on like a house on fire. We had a really lovely lunch, and then we left him because he could only do about an hour and a half. So once lunch was over, but we stayed in contact, and we became pen pals of a sort, and became more intimate by writing.
Yeah.
Because, dare I say, Donald Hall and I are both writers, and so we have that connection of anyway. And he was very, very charmingly gracious, and said, and he told me in at some point, he said, "You have an extraordinary talent for intimacy," was how he put it.
Amen. No, that's great. And
Yeah, and I thought, wow, thank you, Donald. And we went on and I said, I'd love to come and see you again. And before I got to see him again, 2 years had gone by, and I was on tour, and I was in Boston or something, and I'd got like 24 hours off. So I drove from Boston to the farm to Eagle Farm and so on. He said, I can't do lunch anymore. I won't be able to. After about 40 minutes, I start drifting away. But in the meantime, I'd sent him my new record, which This Is the Life You Really Want, and a pair of headphones, because he didn't know what a headphone was. And so he was listening to my work while he was on on his treadmill, being worked out by one of the many lovely women who looked after him after
Yeah.
Jane died, you know. But the most important one being Kendall, who was his sort of PA, who lived 200 yards down the road from the farm.
Yeah.
Anyway, it goes on and on. And so I saw him again, and then, you know, a few minutes later he was dead. He got cancer of the sinus, and boom, he
Damn.
was gone. So there's a whole chapter in my memoir. I've been writing a memoir, and there's a chapter, and it's a weird. Donald Hull's chapter is a weird digression. I'm hitchhiking home from Beirut when I'm 19 years old, and I get something wrong in the memoir about where I was picked up by a minivan full of RAF blokes and taken. Was it in Belgrade or was it in Zagreb or Ljubljana or whatever? Because there's there's an Italian couple who had a budgerigar and a pet tortoise. So I said, no, I must have made up that I got the lift in Belgrade. But I do, in the fact, mention it. I say, one of my letters to Kendall after he dies is, I was in Zagreb last night. Anyway, and at the end of the show, I took it, because I was in Yugoslavia, I told them Donald Hall's One Road story from Essays After 80. And I said, when I got to the part where the Yugoslav guy standing with his pipe at the side of the road looks at them and says, there is only one road in Yugoslavia, they all burst out into spontaneous laughter and applauded. And I thought, what a lovely tribute to Donald Hall that is, those people there getting
Yeah.
that, and the fact that he noticed that, and how the story is actually not about that road trip in 1951. It's about the fact that Kirby dies of cancer later. So the end of his story, eloquently and miraculously, is there is only one road.
So precise. I mean, that's what I love about his stuff. Because he stopped writing poetry. I mean, you came to him after he had stopped writing poetry. Because I guess the only other book after the essays,
It's the 90s book.
yes, is A Carnival of Losses.
Yeah, a
And and
carnival.
and and that's what's so wonderful about him and his poetry. Just his book Without, about the loss of Jane Kenyon,
I know exactly.
and Life
Don't
Worth.
get me started.
I know. I mean, he's fearless and he's so precise. That's the thing that I just absolutely find stunning about him. And getting back to you, it's one of the things too that it seems more and more your work is allowing you to communicate this intimacy thing that you had connected with Donald Hall over. It seems like you're becoming more and more fearless with opening your heart up more and more and more and more. Is that both experience and age? Or is it just the imperative that more and more people have to do that? Because it's not a British sensibility to do that.
No. Um, all of those things, I would guess. Certainly, age has to do with it. I'll be 82 in September. So the clock is ticking. Um, so the last album I made was 10 years ago now. It's how, you know, you make a record and suddenly, bang, 10 years have gone by. And it was called This Is Not a Drill. But the movie of the live show, thank goodness, we put it on film in Prague in May 2022, or 2023. No, May 2023. And we've just put the movie out. banned, by the way, in Sag Harbor, where I live, where I had invited 190 guests to go and see it. And the arseholes who are on the board that runs Sag Harbor Cinema banned me and said, no, you can't show your film here. You're an anti-Semite. Pricks. It brings me
Absolutely.
back to what you were saying earlier about, well, which led us into Donald Hall country, which is about not just the aesthetic life, but the intellectual life as well, and about Neville Shute, and about writing, and about novels, and about that whole life. That entire life has passed our leaders by.
Yeah.
They are ignoramuses to a man, all of them. Every single one of them is totally ignorant of everything that human civilization has produced over the last 100,000 years. And they have no idea. And yet they're proceeding to destroy not just all the starving babies, yeah, we'll get to Gaza later, but the whole world with complete equanimity. They believe that their neoliberal, globalist, capitalist bullshit is actually a proper path of some sort, and that it might have some function that is beneficial in some way to something other than their wallet. Well, it doesn't. I'm sure it suits your wallet, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, Donald Trump, the rest of you motherfuckers. But it serves no other purpose. Isn't
Yeah.
it bizarre?
Yeah. Well, I
I
mean,
know
it
you
makes
know this, Fish.
I do know this. But this must does harken back to now. If we could just consider you becoming a well-known person, a participant in the arts culture of England and in the world. This was a time, the late 60s, early 70s, when the arts community was permitted to participate in the conversation about who we are and where we're going and what's wrong with politics and so forth. And it was just, it was musicians, novelists, the new journalism, writers were asked to go cover political conventions just to give that perspective of I don't want to perpetuate bullshit. I want to communicate what is this really like? What is really going on here? And it seemed like you had a lot more camaraderie at the earlier part of your life, being in league with other musicians who were doing similar things, activists who were inciting popular culture. The mainstream knew who the players were when it came to
Well, were
activism.
they though? Yeah, but you may well be right. As you speak, my brain goes ding, 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 like that. And immediately I think Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. So
Right.
it makes me think Hunter Thompson because it sounds as if that's the journalist or the type of journalism that you're talking about.
Yeah, that was the new journalism, and that's what. And Norman Mailer went and did his book on the March on the Pentagon. Kurt Vonnegut was invited to these. Gore Vidal famously, became an essayist who had a great deal of disdain for powerful people and
Yeah.
repulsive parts of society.
I regret never having met Gore Vidal.
I, I am the same exact way, and I had like a direct line when I worked with Truthdig. He was great friends with Robert Scheer, who was the editor of Ramparts in the '60s, and
Okay.
has been my boss over at SheerPost and Truthdig, and
And he lived in Eze above Monte Carlo for many years when I was toing and froing in that part of the world. So I'm sorry that I missed him. An hour or two in conversation with Gorvy. I quote him quite often in either articles that I write or. I tell you why. What I did was it came from Patrick Lawrence, who'd quoted him in an anecdote about how Harry Truman, when he was standing for re-election in 1949 or something like that, uh, um, accepted a donation of $2 million from a Zionist from a kind Jewish backer of his campaign, and miraculously, about 10 minutes later, he recognized the new state of Israel on May the 13th, 1948. And he was on a whistle-stop tour of North America trying to become elected again. Because,
Right.
of course, never was elected. You know, he was, he was he was the dead bloke's understudy when FDR died, and
Right.
he should have been Henry Wallace. Henry Wallace was the guy the people chose as the vice president for that presidency, and they were but the powers that be went, no, we're not having him. He has faintly socialist. He cares about people. We don't
Yeah.
want him. Let's have this moron, Harry Truman, who knows nothing about anything. And to his great credit, Harry Truman always owned up to the fact that he was totally pig ignorant about everything. He knew nothing, which
Right.
is why he was the perfect choice as the president of the United States,
That's
and
right.
why he went off and bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki at the
Yes.
drop of a hat.
It is the anniversary of that.
Yeah. Anyway.
Well, so does that resonate with you though? Do you feel it seems to me
No.
that the fewer and fewer people who actually say that they give a shit, particularly about Gaza and what's going on with the state of Israel, uh, you're in a minority when it comes to artists who are willing to be it's not even brave, just practical enough to say that something is going on, you know. So it seems like that the spotlight then is extra bright on you, which then invites all this vitriol from people who just they don't know the issue. They think it's impolite to go against these dominant theories of who is right and wrong, who is the hero and the villain in here. uh, is there a frustration that you have that you are in many ways alone when it comes to this kind of work as an artist in the country right now?
Yeah, but I don't think it has much to do with art or the or the music industry or what it was like in the 60s and whether it was actually any better. I promise you I was not on that train in the 60s.
Right.
I was way too busy trying to figure out in the late 60s what to do because Sid had gone loopity-loop and he couldn't write songs anymore. So somebody had to take over the reins of Pink Floyd. And before that, how could I get out of studying architecture and do something which I managed to do? I mean, I've been so unbelievably lucky that I escaped into rock and roll. Not that there's anything wrong with architects, don't get me wrong. It's a perfectly, legitimate path for people who like that kind of. For me, there was rather too much of learn how to please the client and say the right things. And you end up with Norman Fosters of this world building horrible pineapples in the city of London. But sorry, Norman, but oh, what a prick. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. But what is your question? What are we trying to get at? No, I tell you what it is, because this has come up in conversations with other people with me quite a lot, Reese. And with Chris,
Yeah.
mainly with Chris. It's not because I was the age I was and it was the 60s and it was not. People are always going to remember Twiggy more than me. People's attachments to the 60s. It's a bit like Haight Ashbury or the hippies. You know, it's a passing fad. Nobody gives a fuck really about all of that. And there was no great political revolution going on. If you listen to um, people who are sort of faintly revered from those times. Let's pick David Crosby, not because I've got anything against him, but that whole Crosby, Stills, blah blah blah, blah and all of that. I like some of the music, and I'm a huge fan of Neil Young's. Why am I a fan of Neil Young though? I think because he can't stop himself from attaching to the pesky Indian that he's got inside him and then expressing his real feelings about things. And that is why his music is so. That is why. What's the song? Uh, is it called Powder Monkey or Powder? Look out, man! There's a white boat coming up the river. it's got something on the front, and I don't think they're here to deliver the mail, and
Right.
which was on Russ Never Sleeps, which
Yep.
was my favorite bit of Neil. Though I love the love songs, I love Harvest Moon, and I love all of that. I love all of his work. You know, he really is a national treasure. Um, what am I trying to say? I think the whole movement thing is fascinating in an academic way, but I don't find myself attaching to anything that was spectacular. Let's not forget that we betrayed socialism, certainly in my country, in England, in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And we allowed Tony Blair to happen. You know, we didn't send Margaret Thatcher to jail for war crimes or whatever. We just get on with it. Because by and large, we ignored Dickens and his focusing on social problems, let's say, in a capitalist world, in an imperial world as well. We're just now beginning to come round to staring into the Narcissus pool and seeing our reflection and realizing that we are the monster, particularly the English. Our empire all over the world was doing exactly what the Israelis are doing now for hundreds of years. And you're just our offspring. The United States of America is just an offspring of that imperial idea. Fuck them. They're black. They're foreign. They live in. Let's just steal their land and kill them. And that's the ethos.
Yeah.
And so it's no wonder, really, that Keir Starmer, although he pretends to be leading a left-wing, supposedly progressive Labour, if not, they destroyed the Labour Party because Jeremy Corbyn actually was a potentially humane leader of a progressive movement in the tradition of Michael Foot and Arian Bevan, you know. And so they had to destroy him. No, destroy Jeremy Corbyn. And the Americans joined in with it. They don't ever want to hear a single breath from my heart and soul, or Jeremy Corbyn's heart and soul, or your heart and soul, or Chrissy's heart and soul.
Right.
How can we push this to one side? Oh, I know how to do it. We'll do it with Taylor Swift, or bubblegum, or Kim Kardashian's bum. I don't know. It doesn't matter. You know, and it doesn't matter.
But I
Or
think
Ozzy Osbourne, who just died, bless
yeah.
him, in his whatever that state that he was in his whole life. We'll never know. We didn't, you know, although he was all over the TV for hundreds of years with his idiocy and nonsense. The music, I have no idea. I couldn't give a fuck. I don't care about Black Sabbath. I never did.
Right.
I have no interest in biting the heads off chickens or whatever they do. I couldn't care less. You know, so I'm more
Just for
interested.
clarity, just for the sake of artistic integrity, I think it was a bat he bit the head off of.
Oh, okay. Oh my God, that's even worse,
Right.
isn't it? I don't know. Is it worse to bite the head off a bat or a chicken? I'm not sure. They're both pretty tricky, aren't they?
But I think that, but I don't want to go past the 1960s without
Okay.
acknowledging the fact that there were opportunities for pressure coming from the society, from the culture to shift politics. It
Yeah,
seems
but
to me that now that the culture has been debilitated to such a point that now the politicians are drawing all the parameters for all of the conversation. And I think that the culture feels powerless to do anything about it. Where before, artists, public intellectuals gave them the vocabulary at the very least, and also the feeling of uh, how to apply revolutionary ideas inside the society, whether it was just dressing differently, growing your hair, pushing for gay rights, civil rights for blacks, the feminization of society, the environmental movement. Like all of these things, they didn't come from politics. They came from grassroots efforts. They came from organizing, and they came from popular movements. How do you make a movement popular? I would say the best way to make a movement popular is to give it a soundtrack, uh, give it a fashion, give it its own language, give it its own give it its own art, because then all of a sudden you can empower a huge part of the population in such a way that then the politicians have to bend to the will of popular opinion because they're careerists. They want to be voted back in. So I think that's a difference. And you might have been at the center of that hurricane. Um, and as a architect of that time, maybe you were not aware of the benefits and sort of the gift that people who were not part of it are still celebrating. Because
Yeah.
I am. I'm really thankful for it.
Well, okay. Well, I hope you're right, and that my skepticism um, is ill-founded in terms of that, because if we think about when look at myself, and I'm writing my memoir about those days, I have a side sometimes in it, but I write about when I was doing a summer job selling soft drinks to hardy fen folk, and so and passing off sugared water, which is what fizzy pop is really, to these hard-working folk to waste their money on sugary water, money that they could. And I did it because I wanted to raise some money so I could drive off around Europe with my friend Willa, and experience life a bit. But where am I going with this? There is some point to my meandering, and I can't quite remember what it is now. But to think back to those times, yeah, it was 1957. Well, I was 57. I was only 15 years, whatever I was, 14 years old. But that was the Wolfenden Report, and it took them another 10 years to decriminalize homosexuality in England. 1967, it was still illegal to have a homosexual relationship. Didn't matter what sex you were, but they were only thinking about males in those days.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think 1967, routinely on Wimbledon Common, thugs were beating up queers because queers would go to Wimbledon Common or Hampstead Heath to make their assignation. Importuning for immoral purposes was still a crime, even if you were John Betchman or whoever you might be, and it was in an underground lavatory off Piccadilly Circus. No, I'm serious, because
Yeah, yeah.
this is insane. This wasn't the middle of the 19th century. This was in 1967.
Yeah.
And yes, it was eventually made legal, sort of quietly got pushed through the House of Lords, eventually, probably because most of them were gay. No, but
Yeah.
I've no idea.
Yeah.
But so I love the idea, though, that we're talking even about the possibility that intellectual activity or music or culture of any kind, painting, anything,
Yeah.
might have some effect. Is Guernica important? It didn't do a great deal for the Spanish in 1936 or whenever Picasso was painting it.
Right.
But it's a bit like some of the art coming out of Gaza. Now, who knows? It's difficult to.
Well, just as a methodology, I mean, I would argue that like when you work on a song,
Yeah,
or even when you're working on your memoir, you're alone and you're thinking about things and you're trying to figure out what the truth of that is. So these are all private deliberations,
yeah,
right? And I think that if anybody who is forced to be in a private space to really think seriously about anything, you can drill past all of the it, all of the nonsense that tries to codify people into their differences, these
yeah,
manufactured differences.
yeah,
Like, for example, the same thing with the women's movement. I think that, women are trying to even strive to get the vote at one point, right? They don't have a voice. In private, anybody who has a mother, a sister, an aunt, you know that they are not the inferior sex. But quite often they're proven to be the superior sex in many circumstances. Their brains fire differently in a way that I wish mine fired, for
Yeah.
example. So,
Do you think it's easier for the fairer sex to experience empathy than it is for men? I only say that because en passant, you bring up that question, because when you're talking about me and my music, I did an interview with Larry Johnson the other day, and he said Pink Floyd were non-political. And I had to pull him up and say, no, well, the band may have appeared non-political, but I wasn't. And if you actually listen to what I wrote, all those songs that I wrote for Pink Floyd for about 20 years are all hugely political. Every single one of them is. And they somehow, the media managed to develop this erroneous idea that Pink Floyd was about outer space and drugs. It had fuck all to do with outer space and drugs. It's about inner space and a need to discover empathy within our hearts and souls. So empathy is the word that keeps coming off you. It's like you're sitting there and you're going, empathy, empathy, because that's what it is. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah. You recognize the vulnerability that we all share.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you're creating the form of communication that you want to share with people, like I was saying, you devise it and it becomes true and meaningful in a private space, and then you deliver it in a public space. Right. And I think that through history, people have gotten in trouble. There's penalties for communicating your private thoughts in a public space if the dominant culture is not ready to hear it, even though it's the truth. Right. And so that's why I would argue the significance of the arts community as a very viable and positive mechanism for change is because it does that. And what your work does, you're communicating with everything that you do. You're
Not to mention your work.
Well, this is about you. You're telling people that they are not alone.
Yeah.
And you're telling people that that words of radical humanitarianism should feel safe in their mouth too, because you're demonstrating it in an artful way, in a poetic way, in a meaningful way, that if even in public, if they're just like, oh, this is bullshit, I'm not going to present myself as somebody who is in collusion with Roger Waters in a private space, it's hard to argue against everything that you're saying. It's hard to call you an anti-Semite. I've been called an anti-Semite. I no longer work for the University of Pennsylvania because of that, because of the work that I've done.
Yeah.
And you know that just being persistent and having the integrity to keep going fearlessly is the way to slowly shift people into a more benign way of treating each other, and it's our only hopeful way forward.
Yeah. Well, in the song I sent you just before we started this conversation, in the last verse, there's a couplet that goes, "When man evolves beyond the crass and reason comes of age." So I talk a lot, or have done in the last 20 years or so, about reason and the voice of reason. The voice of reason it's all over Dark Side of the Moon Redux in the bit about it. I talk about it, and then about the song Time as the reason I made Dark Side of the Moon Redux was in order to extrapolate some of the empathy that is in that record that people haven't noticed in the 50 or 60 years since 1973.
Yeah.
It's 50 years, for God's sake. And they still don't realize that Dark Side of the Moon is only about my politics and what I'm saying to you now. It's about empathy. That is what it's about. It's about I hope I live long enough, and I won't, but to see man evolve beyond the crass and reason come of age. Because you're right, you cannot, and of course, in a world where reason had come of age, there would be no question of adopting the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, because it's arrant nonsense, and everyone knows it. Even the bloke who wrote it knows it. And he's come out of the woodwork. Well, he wasn't in the woodwork, but I can't remember his name, Kevin or something. He's come out and he said, I didn't mean that, obviously. It's nonsense. It's nonsense to suggest that criticizing the state of Israel is anti Semitic. It's not, obviously. It's so obvious that it's insane that we shouldn't have to. And yet, it's been adopted by 35 out of the 50 states, or however many states there are in the United States now, as being current. And it's law. It's in the law of the land in those 35 states. So it's just like saying, oh, we don't like the meaning of this word, so we'll change its meaning to something completely different. Oh, I know, let's change war into meaning peace, or our form of peace. Let's say, what about if we spend trillions of dollars every year on buying nuclear weapons and aircraft carriers and shit, and try and maintain a hegemonic control over the world, and we call that being a peacemaker? Brilliant. No, it's not brilliant. Why do you think philosophy, the whole study of things philosophical, is about the definitions of the meanings of words and about language? It's because it's so important. If you can make the words anti-Semitic mean anything you want, then we can't have a rational conversation about anything. Reason cannot come of age.
Right. And I think that that's why more and more people have to figure out, where do you go? Who do you stand shoulder to shoulder with who is going to call that bullshit? And how are they going to call it bullshit? And I would always argue that art has a leg up on every other form of communication, because it has in its arsenal the use of satire, the use of just the music without words even. I mean, one of the things too about, you were talking about Dark Side of the Moon, it's being political. There is for me, and for I'm not alone, there are millions of people who get a great deal of quote unquote information from just the musicality of what you've done. And if you just look at the early iterations of Pink Floyd with those long jams of just music while you're improvising in the moment, in the tradition of bebop and so forth, where it's just like, I'm going to now exist in an authentic way in the moment that I am in, because all we have are the moment that we're in. So if you can give somebody the feeling of agency, of being, by forcing them in a way to exist without distraction in the moment that they're in, then you recognize your humanity, you recognize the company of other people around you, all of those things become a truism that is, you can't even argue against it. It's an experiential way to understand that the lingual form is banging on a tin pot when it comes to recognizing who we are and what we should be doing, with each other. Maybe that's always the question.
Except I would suggest this, that if we're involved in a long jam, and I remember those days, okay, and it's mainly because, Sid hadn't written another song, and we couldn't think of anything, so we're just going, Interstellar Overdrive is just rubbish, really. Burn dung 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 dung. And then, now we'll just stay on E minor for half an hour. All right, fucking brilliant. But at a certain point, if somebody is tripping out to that, or enjoying themselves, or maybe even feeling I'm not denying the power of instrumental music to move us in ways that are extraordinary and can feel almost religious and blah blah and all of that. I'm not denying any of that. But what I'm saying is, if dun 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 is whatever, at some point you have to reach up onto cloud nine and grab them by their coattails and bring them down and sit them in a chair and give them a cup of coffee in a white mug, right? And say, could we talk about empathy for a minute? Because do you feel it or not? Because it's the only thing that matters. can you put yourself in the position of the person who's being bombed or being starved or being whatever, or even being left alone or not spoken to on the street or anything, not being helped along life's difficult path by a brother or a sister who reaches out to help? And if you are the brother or sister who has the potential and the possibility to do that, you have to feel empathy for the person who needs your help before you can do it. So empathy is absolutely central to the possibility of any of us feeling fulfilled, in my
Yeah.
view. Unless you're Donald Trump and you feel fulfilled by fucking stomping on people and stealing their money, which he does.
Right.
His father was a rackman. You know, he was a slum landlord. Of course, you grow up to be a horrible human being if that's so. Those of us who can feel empathy, at some point, it would be nice if we had the time to reach out to Donald and say, listen, I think I can help you. Here's where you've gone wrong. But you'd be very difficult to get through to him because he's the president of the United States and he thinks he's done all right.
Well, part of it too is demonstrating it and having people come to it rather than you go to them. You know, I think that that's one of the things. If you can make the affection for your fellow human being uh, um, interesting,
Right.
curious, demonstrative, they come to you. They meet you halfway and they bring their own life experience. And that's one of the things that I really love about a lot of your work, particularly your solo work. There are always these little couplets that actually do that. Like just for example, the pros and cons of hitchhiking, which I think is such a masterful piece of art. Really have always loved it. The end has always been the most beautiful part to it. The very last line. Do you remember what it is?
No. Go on, remind me.
I had a bit of
Luck.
luck.
You were awake. I couldn't take another
I
moment
couldn't
of
take
that.
another moment alone,
Yeah.
you know? And just the same thing with the final cut, behind brown and mild eyes. There's always this little thing
Yeah.
that is just like life is delicate. And it reminds me also of one of my favorite poems by Donald Hall, The Summer Kitchen, where all it does is describe he and Jane getting ready for a dinner time in their house in the summertime.
Wow.
And it's all the elemental things, light the candle, this and that. And then the last line, it was a miracle. And all it had to do was with them following this routine of togetherness, the reliability of that.
When
You
you
know,
highlight that, Fish, and send it to me at the
I
end
will
of this
send it
conversation,
to you.
because I don't know that poem yet. I only
It's
met the man twice, and I haven't read his life's work and blah, 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 blah. I just know
yeah,
there was a huge connection, but I would love
I will send
to
it to you
read that this afternoon.
because you do the same thing. And that's the point that I'm trying to make is that sometimes, yes, I do agree that it is time to be very specific with your language and very specific with your outrage, and definitely target the people who are thieves, retrobates, evil people who are victimizing huge populations. There is a time for that. But I would always say to balance that out, you always want to celebrate what is beautiful, optimistic,
Right.
hopeful, because that's what brings people to you. And it also says that, yes, we are worth saving,
Yeah.
because that's not an intellectual argument to me. I mean,
No, sorry.
but you know what I mean? It's just that because where do you go? I could even ask you, like, so much of what you and I do is grappling with things that fill me with so much rage. I mean, the cartoon that I sent to you,
Yeah.
just, it's Netanyahu pissing on an emaciated Gaza child,
Yeah.
right? That's where my rage can be quite often. But I can't maintain that level of rage all the time. So
Right.
where do I retreat to sort of be like, where do I go to breathe? I do it with music. I do it with camaraderie and friendship with family and friends and this and what I'm doing here with you. I mean,
Yeah.
this to me is the meaning of life. All the other stuff is acknowledging that this is how you live a meaningful life. Stay the fuck off of it and
Yeah.
we've got to organize so that we can live in this place, and service our better angels. Otherwise we're going to disappear.
Well, the work in progress that I sent you earlier finishes off with a kind of litany at the end of encouraging people to stand together and so on. So I'm thinking of all those people who go to all those demonstrations every Saturday in London and England and all over the world. I read that Julian Assange was with 300,000 other people walking across Sydney Harbour Bridge yesterday
Mm.
in support of the Palestinians. So in that song I sent you, it says ordinary people. It's always talking about ordinary people standing shoulder to shoulder from the river to the sea. Ordinary people, people in every nation will join the choir, and blah, blah, and ordinary people, and together these ordinary people. So I keep saying ordinary. Together these ordinary people, because I'm one of them and you're one of them, and that's what's good about us. We are ordinary people, but together these ordinary people will turn this ship around. So I feel it's part. I feel that I am against all possible odds. I am optimistic that our capacity for empathy will trump our capacity for greed. It's a graphic choice. Do you choose truth and love, or do you choose lies and hatred and greed? Greed is the most. We have to. No, greed is
Right.
not helping us.
Right.
Sharing stuff with other people is what helps us. And
Yeah.
and when we reach that final moment and expel the final, which is the psyche, I'm told, is the final exhalation of breath as we die. You know, there's a certain satisfaction in knowing that I nearly said Bambi, but I don't mean Bambi because that's very kind of Walt Disney, except that there's something about Bambi which is helpless. So Bambi is just an expression of a helpless child, or a helpless adult, an old person who's homeless and needs. We as a society and we as individuals all would need to be able to put ourselves. Two strangers passing in the street, by chance two passing glances meet, and I am you, and what I see is me, is central to everything. That's what I said to Larry the other day. I said, didn't you ever listen to Echoes? Not all the bullshit about, overhead the albatross hangs motionless upon the... Fuck all that. I'm talking about two strangers passing in the street. That's the important bit. That is the kernel that led on to everything else. Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here, The Wall, Animals, all of that writing that I did with Pink Floyd, and all the stuff I've done since, Present Guns Fit, Shaking Amused to Death, and Is This the Life We Really Want? And the new one, which I think will be called The Bar, but it might be called something else. We'll see. I'm in the middle of the process
Do you have
now.
a release date or
No,
any no idea?
no, as soon as I can manage it, but it's not easy. It takes time,
I can imagine.
sadly. It's lovely to talk to you.
No, really great to talk to you.
Conversation is such a cool thing, isn't it? The good thing about the internet, it's funny that I should be calling my working title for the new record is The Bar, because I started singing the song, The Bar. Does everybody in the bar feel pain? Yeah, sure they do. Because we're all in the same kind of predicament. And the bar is where we get to go to do this, where we can
Yeah.
talk to one another in a place that feels safe. And it's not about alcohol, it's about camaraderie and it's about communication. And sadly, in a way, this internet thing is sort of as close as most of us come together. I never go to a public place and talk to strangers. Do you? I mean, I just don't. But then I don't have a local bar where that is what
Yeah.
you do.
Yeah.
But it's
Well,
interesting that in England, if it's the pub, there's the public bar and the saloon bar, and the saloon bar is for rich people, and the public bar is for the working people. So there's which is that is the tradition, and that's the way it was organized. Is fascinating. And now, of course, pubs are full of TV sets,
Yeah.
so you can't talk.
Well, it still is. I was just over there. I was in England and France and Berlin, and one of the things that was really great to experience outside the US was public spaces are for fraternization and sort of being aware of other people around you. I mean, the idea of going and opening your laptop was just
No,
not an option, you know. And so that's and this is also when I love the bar, um, because I went to the This Is Not a Drill
oh, good.
show, and I think I'd sent you an email and said, in all sincerity, that it shifted me in a way that I'm still feeling. I mean, it's such a powerful show, and for those people who were unable to go see it live, the fact that you've released it and I saw it in the theater 2 weeks ago, I guess, you should really go see it if you haven't seen it, because it's an amazingly open and honest attempt at saying this is not a drill, and framing all of the songs the way you did. You really succeeded in expanding what we thought that those songs were all about as Pink Floyd songs, okay, Roger Waters revealing, you know, excavating what they really mean to Roger Waters, really resonated with everybody. I mean, you felt this. I'm not telling you anything you know. I mean, you've packed those
No,
arenas.
you are. You are telling me stuff I don't know because I can't be in the audience. All I can be is, doing my thing and doing it as well as I can with my lovely band who I adore and blah blah
Yeah.
blah, and Sean Evans and Andy Jennison and all the whole team who together we've created that whole visual thing, and we tried to make a piece of theatre that we hope will move people who come to watch it. So it's
And you
good.
did.
It's good to hear the feedback from
Well, you
Mr.
shouldn't be
Fish.
shocked. Indeed.
No, it is. It's great. Thank you.
Well,
Really.
thank you. I mean, this has been really a great conversation, and I look forward to the potentiality for some more in the future as we stand in this fight to save ourselves.
Yeah. Well, I'll come back anytime, brother.
Well, keep it up.
Yeah, I will. And you.
Okay. Onward and upward.
Onward and upward.
I get back to work. I'm waiting for that CD.
You what?
I'm waiting for that album. Get back to work. I
Oh,
don't know
okay,
what
I
you're doing.
will. Yeah, okay. Getting back to now, sir. Getting back to work now, sir.
All right. Thank you, Roger.
Cheers.
Bye bye.
Bye.